I believe you've worked together before. Tell me, you've directed 5 episodes of Mad Men before this, and so you've worked together for several years. Making this film, did you have to lose a lot of your habits? Did you have to kind of break your habits and start again? You're working together in a completely different way.
Well, John had directed me in Mad Men, so I was familiar with him as a director. I just think the project was so entirely different too. It didn't even you just had to approach it in a whole different way, naturally.
Yeah, I mean, I think I hadn't worked with. I think I'd acted with Phil Hoffman a couple of times, and I knew some of the other people a little bit. But there was this, we'd worked together, acted together for years, and there was a bit of a shorthand, and we were comfortable with each other. So there was a comfort seeing Christina. Every day there was some new actor walking onto the set, and while I'm very comfortable on a set and talking to actors, it was nice to see someone that I had worked with and known for that long. So I don't think we had to reinvent our sort of way of communicating or anything like that.
But it must be a completely different experience of directing as well, because when you're doing a show, you're kind of working to a kind of template, and you're trying to find something that you can do within that template. And here, you can kind of invent the style from scratch, and it's completely different doing something that's 100 minutes long as opposed to a chunk of something that has a long, I hate the word arc, but a long arc.
Yeah, well, I mean, on Mad Men, that's someone else's show. Excuse me. It's Matt Weiner's show. You're given the script, you're given your marching orders, and you have a short amount of time to do kind of both his interpretation and yours. You're sort of expected to put your stamp on it as well, which isn't that easy to do. You can cut corners, or you can decide, I only want to do this in a 2-shot. I don't want to cover this, but then they'll expect that. So this was something I kind of cooked up on my own, and so there's that, I guess, burden, for lack of a better word. It didn't feel like that, but you sort of got all those people there, because of something you'd figured out. So there's a creative satisfaction to that. There's also a lack of the structure that's on Mad Men. The stages are there, the actors are there, everyone's there for about a 6-month period. So if you don't get a scene shot fully, or if you don't, fully realize something, chances are you can come back because everyone's around. If you don't get, a scene in this where it's 1978 and it's, the cars and clothes and the police permits and everyone's busy, Eddie Marzan coming from here and John Turturro and all those people, everyone's. So there was that slight added pressure of, I really have to get this right now because I'm never going to get all these pieces together again.
And given that you've spent all this time kind of embodying, sort of uptown sophistication and elegance, is it kind of a pleasure to sort of roll your sleeves up and get into this very kind of gritty, dirty world?
It was, in fact. It was nice, not only is it a whole different world, but a completely different kind of character than the one I play half the year on Mad Men. And I was really pleased that John trusted me to do it. And like you said too, this what's going to happen to this character in this amount of time, and so you approach it in a whole different way instead of sort of having things revealed to you week after week. So it was quite refreshing, actually.
And the film is based on a book by Pete Dexter, who filmgoers know from adaptations of Paris Trout and The Paperboy. And apparently it came from his real experience that he was a journalist who wrote a story about this particular neighborhood, which is the neighborhood of Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And they didn't like it. And he got on the rough end of people's fists, apparently.
Yeah, he was beaten up in a bar. He was a drinker, and he was in a bar. He was a sports writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer. And somewhere in the late 70s, he was beaten up in a bar, and he left, and he got a friend of his, Randall Tex Cobb. I don't know if you remember who that is. He was in Raising Arizona. He was the guy on the motorcycle. It was an actual boxer, and he brought him back to the bar to kind of take care of business, and they both he almost got killed. And he told me he stopped drinking, he left Philadelphia, he left the newspaper business, and he started writing books. And this was the first he wrote.
And why was it particularly this book that you felt was?
You know,
what
I
you
don't know
about?
whether it was more than that event that motivated his writing about that neighborhood, which was called the Devil's Pocket, which is in South Philadelphia, called that because the people were so rough they could steal money out of the Devil's Pocket. I've really had about 3 conversations with Pete Dexter on the telephone. He wasn't really involved in the making of the film, but very supportive after the fact, and that's what he told me.
I mean, it strikes me very much as an actor's film in the sense that you've got this extraordinary ensemble cast doing things that they don't necessarily usually do, and in very interesting combinations. And was that one of the things that appealed to you about it, that it wasn't about a particular character around whom everything revolves, that it really is kind of an ensemble piece?
Yeah, I would say it was Mickey's story, probably. But initially I offered Phil Hoffman the part of Shelburne, the journalist, and he called back and said, I went through the agents and everything, and he said, they said he likes it, but he wants to play Mickey, which took me about 2 minutes to realize what a good idea that was. I don't know. I didn't really have anybody specific, but I guess I started with him in that journalist role, and he felt like he'd played that, I guess, before, and so once that was clear, I think Christina was probably the next person. I think I might even have given you the script sooner than that. And said, I think Phil is interested, in case you're, I'd like you to play this part if you're interested in the next year or so, whenever we get a window of time. But then once we had Christina and Phil and that script, which, is all Pete Dexter. I mean, there isn't anything in that script that isn't in that book. Everyone said yes. Every single actor I called said yes. And then it was just a matter of figuring out the schedule. So there's this cast of actors. I feel very lucky having, put that together, yeah.
And I think this was Philip Seymour Hoffman's, not apart from The Hunger Games, but not his final film, but his penultimate film. And one of the interesting things about it, I wanted to ask what it was like working with him, but the thing that really struck me in this film is we think of him as someone who kind of takes command of the movie and takes command of the screen, but actually in this, he's quite standing back. He's very much a sort of ensemble player. He's not, it's a very kind of restrained, he's kind of very much a group player here.
We talked about that a lot in the beginning. Mickey's very nonverbal. I mean, the part of the problem he has is that he can't communicate with his wife, and he can't quite figure out why. He can't tell her what he feels like. He doesn't even, the opening line is, Mickey Scarpato was 45 years old and didn't understand women in the way poor people don't understand the economy. He was just so behind the curve. He didn't really know even how to get himself out of the hole. And he's very nonverbal in his but you center on him and you understand that he's in a dilemma and he's trying to do the right thing by his wife. So there was we had to have those discussions on how do you communicate this situation and these feelings nonverbally. And there is an ensemble nature to this, and that's the neighborhood is in the title of the film, and it was important to me to try to create a world, and I think, I think we did so, but everybody had to do their part.
And how did you work with him on that kind of non-verbal communication stuff? I mean, there's a kind of, the 2 characters are together some of the time, but then they're kind of drifting apart, and the scenes with him are, they're quite sort of edgy and uncomfortable. Was that something that you?
It felt uncomfortable as we were rehearsing. I was able to fly and meet John and Phil in New York, and we had a nice sit down, several hours. We just sat there and went through the script and talked about the relationships and talked about the characters, and sort of trying to figure out who these people are. But like John said, you know, it's hard to get everyone in one place at one time, and so we didn't have the luxury of rehearsing a lot. We were doing it before each scene. So sometimes we were discovering new things as, you know, that morning as we got there all together. We were sort of discovering these moments, and it became a lot about sort of the physicality, I think, of them, how they walk by each other or how they don't touch, and all these awkward moments of her looking at him like, how come you don't know what I need? Why aren't you helping me? Why aren't you comforting me? And him looking at her desperately like, what on earth do you need? And neither of them telling each other. And we were sort of discovering as we went, and then it started to just unfold.
And the other person you have a very kind of difficult relationship in the film is a character played by Richard Jenkins, who is an extraordinary presence, and people will know him particularly, apart from his movies, people will know him as the dead father in 6 Feet Under. But he's got this incredible sort of brittle, unpleasant personality in this film, yet he's very sympathetic. And I wanted to ask you about working with him, but I also wanted to ask you whether one of the things that you both like, given the kind of characters who appear in Mad Men, is characters who are really not very nice and that you wouldn't want to be around, but nevertheless you can't take your eyes off.
Yeah, I mean, his character is so sort of pitiful to me, and yet he has this charisma, and he's this local celebrity, and people admire him and look up to him, but he's just a mess. And Richard was just so great, because he would just get this look on his face as he looked at me, and it was just this like bizarre yearning that you couldn't help but be sort of like, ooh. He's such an incredible actor. And you know, Jeannie's in this position of trying desperately to find answers and find out what happened to her son, and no one's helping her. Her community that she's lived in her whole life is turning their heads, and she feels gaslit by this whole situation, and she makes a very desperate move. And one of the reasons is she thinks this man could help her find answers, but also she needs to be nurtured and loved and held so much at that moment that this guy is obviously very willing to give her that attention that she needs. And it comes from this well-known, respected man, and she ends up not getting any of the answers that she needs, and it really doesn't work out for her. But it's a tricky and interesting relationship between those two.
And there's a very weird thing in the film as well, that it keeps kind of changing registers, that, you know, sometimes it's really sort of black comedy, and sometimes it does kind of click into, you know, something, you know, sort of darker realism, but it sort of slips around in a sort of strange way.
Yeah, as does the book. I mean, that's why I liked it too. I mean, I know people, you know, you either sort of accept that or you don't. But that is why I sort of, my mouth would be hanging open reading the book going, wait, what? A minute ago, they're trying to figure out their marriage, and then 20 minutes later, he's dragging the dead body of his stepson around the corner trying to figure out, well, I guess I got to put him in my truck. That's why I liked it. And that's what I thought Pete Dexter did very well. And just trying to capture that tone and was, I suppose, the challenge of the film. You know, I suppose the challenge of most films is maintaining the tone which interests you in the first place.